This is the Certificate 4 in Mental Health. And this topic that we're doing tonight is CHCLEG001, Work Legally and Ethically. And this is the last session of this one. So we've had two of the sessions, and this is the third one. So we're complete after tonight, and then we're moving on to another topic next week. So just to start, we'll kick off with the acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayder Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And with that, we'll just move on to the housekeeping, just the general week-to-week things. When we've got a class running with all the learners in it, then it's cameras on. Everybody camera on just helps everybody take part and get involved. Microphones muted as well, so cameras on, microphones off, just so that there's no feedback or noise coming in from the background. It really helps. Class break times. When we're doing a few hours on an evening of study, then after an hour, we usually have a break, and then another hour, and then another break, each one about 10 minutes each. So that's really helpful. Class participation. With that, we love to hear from everybody. We need the interaction because it really, really helps. When there's classes on and when there's learners turning up, that's awesome. We love to hear from you. Please use the Zoom reactions button to put your hand up. We shouldn't be too snowed under tonight, though. And with that, respectful relationships. Be mindful and kind with your words and respect the opinion of others. We're all learners and in this together. So that's important. Valuing each other's opinions, valuing each other's experience as well. No smoking or vaping or drinking alcohol on camera in the class. We wouldn't ask anything that of our learners that we wouldn't expect in industry. So if it was a TAFE course in a TAFE or a staff meeting in a meeting room, we wouldn't be smoking, drinking on work time or on work premises. So it's the same here. It's a learning environment. Also, with things that are going on, it could also be a trigger for people. If somebody is trying to kick a habit or deal with an issue that is really strong for them, and they turn up to a class and see somebody smoking, it's not gonna help them at all. And finally, be kind to yourself. Obviously, looking out for each other, looking out for everybody else, but also looking after yourself. Make time for other activities that nourish your mind and soul so you feel refreshed and ready for class each week. So we'll jump into the topic. A few videos tonight, a few resources. If you need anything, then please contact us. Email, learning support, me, anybody that does the mental health stuff, mental health classes, that is, just for any of the resources. So just to start off, if we were in a group, then as I've just said, looking after yourself is important, but with self-care, reflect on one thing you can commit to doing this week for self-care. So looking after yourself, what can you do one thing of? Could be anything. It could be something small. It could be a bit of a stretch and you do something huge. But what can you do to look after yourself? Self-care this week. We have different zones. So it could be a physical thing, it could be a mental thing, an emotional thing, spiritual. So what area could you put into? It could be diet or sleep. what would you do? One thing you can commit to. It could be every day for the week. It could be once this week. One big thing of looking after yourself. So tonight we are looking at referrals and document resources for ethics and boundaries. So going down the structure, we're looking at dignity of risk. We're looking at personal values and ethics, ethical dilemmas, professional boundaries, conflicts of interest, and then child protection and mandatory reporting. So that's tonight. And that'll finish off, like I said, that'll finish off the topic of the CHCLEG001. So to start, we do have a video, but this comment is important. With the dignity of risk, the right to take risks when engaging in life experiences, the right to fail in taking needs. So we all have a right to a dignity of risk. We're adults, we're humans, we have a right to make our own free will choices, and we have a right to succeed and fail in doing them. If I choose to do something that could be dangerous or risky behavior, then it's not about necessarily the responsibility of taking the consequences, but it's more part of if failure is going to be or a mistake or an accident or a bit of a crash, then I have the dignity to take that on as well. So just because I've taken on risky action doesn't mean that I need to be protected from the outcome. So the video that I was wanting to show you is it's on the screen and it is dignity of risk, but I'll give you the word as well. There you go. So that's the address that you need to type in for it. And there's a guy having a great time in some risky behavior that he's really, really enjoying. But that doesn't mean that we should stop him from doing that. With the video that you'll see, it's really, really important to actually I think I've given you a different video. I was going to watch a different one and I've just clicked. I'm sorry. Yes, I was. So you can find that one, you can watch that one, but this is way better. What is duty of care versus dignity of risk? It's really, really important because she's contrasting them both here. When we go into community services work, a lot of us might go in because of feeling like we've got a duty of care, but here she's contrasting them both. And you've got the web address there from Daily Motion. I think it's on YouTube as well. I'm sure it is. I'm sure I've watched it there. So dignity of risk and moving on. So as I just said, duty of care. Duty of care is the most important thing that underpins community service work. So because we're working with humans, whether they're tiny ones or senior ones, all across the spectrum, they've all got human rights, which means we have a duty of care based on their human right. So we have a duty of care to take all reasonable steps to ensure the safety of the client. We have a duty of care to do no harm. We have a duty of care to improve their quality of life, and we have a duty of care to follow a support plan. That doesn't mean, I'm sure a lot of us might have thought that because of our duty of care, we have to protect them from themselves. We have to protect them from harming, putting themselves in a risky behavior. There's a difference between self-harm and involving themselves in risky behavior, even if it's seniors in a nursing home. that they have a dignity of risk to not take the prescribed medication. They don't want it. They'd rather not, for whatever reasons they've chosen. Um, so we are taking all reasonable steps to ensure the safety of the client. But if they're putting themselves in harm's way, then in the end, it's their personal choice. If we can advise them that it's going to be risky or dangerous or harmful, but we're not there to protect them from themselves all the time. So with dignity of risk here we see on the stones, it's a very delicate balance between duty of care and protecting them and looking after them and supporting them and empowering them to reach their maximum potential quality of life, and then dignity of risk on the other side with the risks that they might choose to put themselves into. And just like the rock climber, it could be it could be not taking prescribed medication. It could be actively taking substances that are going to endanger them. It could be working in a risky environment. It could be trying to help them realize which people in their friend or family zone are toxic, but we can't do it for them. All we can do is help them make choices or give them information to make the choices themselves. So we have the dignity of risk to smoke cigarettes if we choose. So do our clients also have the right to choose to smoke? They do, yes. When might a client not have a right to choose to smoke? What is our ethical obligation in the end? There are parameters around that. Like, when might a client not have a right to choose to smoke? Well, in any public place, it's illegal for anybody to smoke in that location. So we won't be able to support them in doing that when it's an illegal activity. But if somebody chooses to want to smoke, then we can't stand in their way. What might we do to balance duty of care with dignity of risk? Motivational interviewing. Listen to the client's point of view. And when we study a lot of motivational interviewing, and you'll see it on YouTube videos or as we study it, there's a certain formula and a format to motivational interviewing, the way it goes around with the questioning. So looking into motivational interviewing, psychoeducation, trying to help them understand the way their brain works and trying to help them do the things that they are wanting to do that are going to improve their life. Harm minimization measures might be any reducing risk of harm at all. So they say they want to smoke, but they would rather reduce a couple of cigarettes a week. Then that's fine. If they want our support to do that, then we can try and engage them and try and make a plan for them to reduce the smoking. Just like if we're in a community services, aged or disability care, if they're legally allowed to smoke in whatever situation, then that's their prerogative and we can't stand in their way of doing that. So personal views and attitudes. Everyone is entitled to their values and attitudes. We might think that some people have very, very strange values or attitudes or perspectives, but we are in a human society that says that everybody has a right to their values and attitudes. They're not always, it's not always helpful to air your views and values and attitudes. Sometimes it's inappropriate, whether they are healthy or unhealthy, whether they are politically one way or the other. It's not always useful to air them, but everybody is entitled to have their own. You should not interfere with how others are treated in the workplace. And non-judgmental practice is key to treating everyone with dignity and respect. So no matter what perspective, everybody is entitled to that view, and we're not going to judge anybody for having a different view to ours, no matter how strange it might seem. So each client is different and has their own unique set of circumstances, and we respect the client as the expert of their own life. They might be coming to us thinking that we're the experts, or we might think we're the experts, but we're not really the experts in their life. They're the experts in their own life. And we're there to help them navigate certain issues, certain struggles, and help them do the things that they want to do for a better life. And with to make sure that cultural practices can be very different from our own, but still valued. When personal values and attitudes enter the workplace, they can inadvertently lead to conflict, discrimination, harassment, and bullying, among other unacceptable practices. But just moving on, with ethical dilemmas, when we're looking at ethical dilemmas, we'd be looking into things that might not be illegal, but they might not be creating a healthy environment for the client, for the person that we're working with, but then they might ask us to help them do it anyway. So it's not illegal, but it's not going to build the role or our job responsibility into a positive place. That might mean that might mean that that might mean that we would be doing something wrong, but not illegal. Or it could mean that the person that we're working with is going to be doing something wrong, but not necessarily illegal. Which means black and white is grey. So some issues are just not black and white. We might disagree with smoking. We might hate smoking. We might believe that smoking just causes cancer and it's just the wrong thing to do for everybody. Even though we think that smoking is never, ever right for anyone to do, we might have to be put in the situation where we helping a client buy cigarettes because they want to smoke. They could be infirm, they could be with some disability, or they could be senior, and trying to get their own cigarettes is going to be difficult. So it's not illegal for them to smoke, but we're trying to help them progress their own life in their own way. So to reflect on the issues, we recognize the problem in the ethical issues, recognize the problem, evaluate the options, find the information, liaise and consult with colleagues and supervisor. So if we're unsure about what we need to be doing, whether it's inappropriate for us to do this thing, then we speak to our supervisor, our mentor, our line manager. So that could be a line manager in the workplace, or it could be some sort of clinical supervisor, a senior social worker or senior psychologist that we would go to for supervision. All of them are helpful just to reflect ideas on. So then after that, after we've got all of our information, all of our wisdom from all our other support workers, our other peers, colleagues, and supervisors, then we'll come to a decision, then take time to reflect before taking action. So nothing there means it's going to be a knee-jerk instant reaction, but to take time to look it over and think about it. So can you think of any ethical dilemmas? There's plenty of them. Could you think of any when put on the spot? If you can't, put a few here. Like I said, with the resources, if you need any of these, then contact us because we can hand them over. So ethical dilemma, we've got a few on here. Here we go. So a client is selling chocolate for a fundraiser to help the homeless. One of the human service workers at the agency buys a candy bar from the client to support the cause. So client, the chocolate boxes, and you give $2 and all the money from the chocolate goes to the charity, that type of thing that you might get in plenty of workplaces. Um, so the client is selling the chocolate for a fundraiser to help the homeless. Um, it's not about will the client give the money to the homeless. It's got nothing to do with that. It's more about us giving money to clients for a service. Now, and it's also not about whether we believe that um, the homeless need any money. It's specifically just about giving our clients that they're coming to for support, giving them money for chocolate, um, even though it's going to a charity, even though they're probably not going to get money out of it. What's the big issue there? You've got to decide. Um, so also ethical dilemma number 2. At work, a human services counsellor, who is also a member of a fundraiser committee for his church, sells a raffle ticket to his co-worker. The client overhears the transaction and offers to buy a raffle ticket for the fundraiser. Human services worker refuses to sell a raffle ticket to the client. Do you agree or disagree with the human service worker's action? So again, it's the other way around now. The staff member is selling to the client. It could be a legitimate charity, could be really useful charity, could be the greatest charity that all of these 3 people really believe in. But is it appropriate for the staff to be selling the ticket to the client, to the service user? Here we've got Sabrina. A client is in a group session that's almost finished for the day. Her 83-year-old mother frantically phones the agency, indicating that there is a family emergency and Sabrina needs to come home immediately. Sabrina's human services worker, Pedro, checks her chart, but there isn't a written consent to release information to her mother. Pedro consults with his supervisor, who makes an executive decision to give Pedro permission to speak to the mother. Pedro tells the mother that he will give Sabrina the message. So we're talking about client confidentiality. Sabrina might not want anybody in her family to know that she's working there. What's the massive emergency? What is it exactly? Is it the dinner is going to be half an hour late, or is it that a family member's dying? No matter what the emergency is, I'm not going to tell you. You've got to figure that out. In a local supermarket, Janet, the service worker, is walking down one of the aisles. She sees Margarita, a client in the agency, walking down the same aisle with other people. From one angle, it seems that Margarita does not see Janet. It's not Janice. Sorry, it's my bad eyes. It's Janelle. I'll read it again. In a local supermarket, Janelle is a human services worker. She's walking down one of the aisles. She sees Margarita, a client in the agency, walking down the same aisle with other people. From one angle, it seems that Margarita does not see Janelle. Janelle continues to walk past Margarita without saying hello. Do you agree or disagree with the service worker's action? So, similar to the last thing, if we're not allowed with client confidentiality, if we're not allowed to give any information over to anybody and say whether a client is in our service, we're going to be putting somebody in a very difficult situation when we say hello to Margarita. Margarita has then got to decide whether she tells her friends, whether she knows us or not. So we're not there to put her into a difficult situation. Do one more. Katerina is a client with an open case, has been with the agency a number of times. So there's one episode of treatment, might be about 3 to 6 months, and then it gets closed off, and then the whole treatment starts again with different goals. So Katerina is a client with an open case who's been with the agency a number of times, who's been through a few times. The typical behaviour is to have poor attendance without calling a counsellor for days. To date, neither her human services counsellor nor Katerina has contact over 4 weeks. The agency requires that non-compliant cases are to be closed 4 weeks after the last date of contact. The human services worker closes Katerina's case today. So, has it been 4 weeks? Sometimes Katerina might come back after a few weeks and say, I'm here, it's fine, and want to catch up where she left off. But quite often, the assessment procedure might need to be run through again. She might be out of the country, she might be on a bender, she might be struggling with mental health issues, but every few weeks, without contact, there might be quite a large assessment procedure to go through again. So that's the ethical dilemmas. So in the workforce, what is it that you're going to do? Before I move on, I'll just show you the learning guide as usual. So here we're going down. As I said, we've done 2 weeks. This is the third week. So going down here. Here we go. So we're looking at ethical practice in week 2, human rights and ethics, ethical issues. We're moving from here into this week here. Work practices with child protection, things like that, policies and procedures with child protection. So we're working down there. This is where we left the slides. Thinking of an ethical dilemma. There's a few. So next level is boundaries. An ethical dilemma is based on our boundaries. So where our boundaries for our scope, not just our job role, not just our scope of practice, but our boundaries for self-care and duty of care and the dignity of risk, all of the boundaries that go around each of them areas are going to help us figure out what the best ethical dilemma, the best solution is in each ethical dilemma. So with boundaries, we've got boundaries of privacy, information, confidentiality, session times, AOD in relation to transportation, gifts, cards, flowers, chocolates, relationships, friends, breach of ethics, don't disclose personal information, be clear on your job role and responsibilities, self-disclosure, peer and lived experience, self-care, debriefing versus social debriefing. So all of those are important. We do go over them all in other classes, in other sessions, so you get to know a bit about each one in detail. If you're not sure if you're not sure of any of the definitions, then please ask. With boundaries, I've got another sheet for you. So this is how to build good boundaries. Providing care to clients raises many challenges for workers. The role of the professional worker can mean that you're in many Intimate situations with clients and their friends and families. You may have access to private or confidential information. You may also encounter situations where you're confronted with needs, requests, or demands for services or support that are not your role as support worker or carer. That's anything from the client might have a lot of needs, and when we're trying to figure out which are the most important needs, if the really important needs is that they have no money, um, and we're not a financial service, then it would be beyond our scope of practice. It would be inappropriate for us to give them money, give them any financial assistance when we're not trained to do that, or when our agency is working in a different area. So it might even be against company policy to do something like that. There would be no problem with us making sure that they know where the nearest financial support service is. That's something that we need to um, be aware of, where the nearest place might be. It might be in our scope of practice to give them a lift to get there in our company car or a work vehicle. Obviously, it would be inappropriate for us to use our own personal car. So there's the boundaries around the ethics that we are trying to understand, they're important. So just going on a bit further, there's some key qualities of good support working. So why do we need ethical standards? Ethics are the beliefs that we hold about what constitutes the right conduct in a particular situation or job. And there it's saying a particular situation or job. So it might be okay for one person to do in one workplace, but it's not okay for us to do in this workplace. Could be with the same client, could be a different client. It could be the same staff member, a different staff member. So depending on the client, the staff, and the workplace means that it might happen, it might not happen. So that's useful. We'll look at that one in a minute. So another video for conflict of interest. There's 4 things to understand. I'll bring the video up for you. There it is. What is a conflict of interest? And that is the address, the web address. Have a look on that and incorporate that into what we're looking at. Conflict of interest with when you sign up, when you work under a new job contract and you sign up to sign your contract, you might be asked if you have any specific financial interest in the workplace. So there is quite often an awareness of conflict of interest in most workplaces. It's just slightly different in a different workplace. It's almost bigger in community services and a political area. So we just have to be careful with conflicts of interest. Keeping children safe. So looking at mandatory reporting, obviously the introduction with the new client, everything is private and confidential. Whatever you tell me is safe. It's a safe space. Tell anything to me in privacy. We keep it confidential unless there's an unless anybody's at risk of harm or there's a child at risk of harm. And that's pretty much it. It goes to a next level when we find out who might be at risk of harm. So recognize and respond to signs there may be safety issues for children. organisational policy, legal and ethical codes of practice to meet duty of care, and how to respond in an ethical manner. So what the best way to do is. It's not a legal minefield, it's an ethical minefield. The legalities are very black and white with mandatory reporting, but how we put it into practice is it's sometimes never the same way twice. So with child abuse, what is harmful? The World Health Organization defines child abuse and neglect as physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, negligent treatment, and commercial or other exploitation. So with all of the areas of our personality, who we are, with mental health, physical health, social, spiritual as well, all the different areas of health that we are, there can be abuse term there. So we have to be careful that if we don't get abused, that we can leave ourselves open to abuse. And if we're a little bit more wiser or meant to be more wise than children, then they can not necessarily realize that there could be something going on. So signs of abuse, changes in behavior and or presentation. So for there to be a change in behavior, we need to know the person before that. So if just because somebody is really, really quiet doesn't necessarily mean there's been a sign of abuse there. If the person has often been more loud and more open, more talkative, and now there's a change in personality, or the other way around, they've gone from quiet to loud suddenly. That's a massive change in behavior, presentation, a reluctance to go home, being seemingly accident prone, excessive smoke, rocking, sucking, and biting, showing wariness and distrust of adults or too trusting, difficulty sleeping, or often being tired and falling asleep. And it's about knowing a little bit about the person first, about the child. So we might come to a conclusion ourselves, but then, as mentioned earlier, we might need to speak to our line manager. We might maybe look at other services, contact other services that are already working with the person and try and find out a bit about the character, who they are normally, before we make any rash judgments. So signs of abuse, inconsistent explanation for injuries, low self-esteem, bedwetting or soiling, aggressive or demanding behavior, difficulty relating to adults and peers, difficulty concentrating, being withdrawn or overly obedient, creating stories, poems, or artwork about abuse. So there's some key things there on both them pages, but you have to know the person to start with a little bit to know whether difficulty sleeping, does that mean that there's a sign of abuse there? Or difficulty concentrating. I have difficulty concentrating at certain times of the day, unfortunately. With that in mind, I not mind concentrating, but just looking for abuse. The video for this one is this one, reaching out, child abuse, when and how to report. That's important. When and how to report. And that's important because it might be different in different, well, it is different in different states and territories. So depending on the state and territory, who you are, who the child is, and what state or territory they're in means that you might not report or you might have to report, because a lot of agencies or services are doing it differently, even in the same state and territory, there might be a different protocol and way to do it. So that's the web address there. And that's the video. So going back to duty of care, all professionals have a duty of care to the children in their care. That means quite often the child that is connected to our client, then we have a responsibility to the child as well, not just to the client. Our responsibility is to the client most of all, but it's also to the client child who is connected to them as well. So we have a duty of care to the safety of the child, but our duty of care is primarily to our client. Reporting is essential to stop and protect them from further harm. And the purpose of imposing the legal or other obligations to report is to enable an investigation and assessment of the situation, for the protection and for planning long term, for help and protection of the family, the child and family. So responding to a disclosure, when a client has said that there's a child vulnerable, what do? We validate and listen to the child, or listen to the remarks about the child or the story, and explain you need to tell other grown-ups, never promise confidentiality, obviously. It's even more important that when we're talking to an adult client and we say everything's confidential, but unless there's somebody at risk of harm, we can't promise confidentiality to a child. We can promise safety, we can promise care, we can promise kindness. We can use all sorts of words that we can promise to them, but we can't promise confidentiality because confidentiality is not going to help. I need to make sure that you're kept safe. It's more important than confidentiality. Consult with the relevant line of management, e.g. coordinator, team leader or supervisor. Consult with the family if appropriate, and follow your organization's policies, including reporting procedures. The way we report, whether report, and who we report to could make a situation even worse than it already is, which is why we are consulting with our supervisors, and that we're not going to do it in a knee-jerk reaction. It's not meant to be instantly done. It's meant to be a calculated process of safety. And the people that have been working in this area a lot longer than us have got a certain wisdom around when to report, where to report, and who to, and which child. So, making a report. The Child Protection Service will ask for the following information. Bit of a description, and wherever we report, there's a website, there's a telephone number. It might be us that does it because we're working directly with the client. It might be a certain person in our organization that does all of the reporting. So we pass all of the details to that person in our organization, a bit like a health and safety representative. But if there's a health and safety risk at work, somebody's left a plank with a nail sticking through it, then okay, we need to make sure that the place is safe, and we might move the plank out of the way, but it's up to the work health and safety representative to make sure that, well, where's it come from? Is it something that's already damaged? Does it need putting back? Does something need to be made safe because there's planks with nails in falling all over the place? And that person is the responsible person to sort all of that out. In a similar way, quite often there'll be a child protection worker or child protection officer in our workplace. So that's a lot of the details. There's almost as many different ways to deal with it as there are states and territories in Australia. So when we're looking at it, we've got New South Wales, Western Australia, Northern Territory, Queensland, South Australia, ACT, Capital Territory, and Victoria. And there's different expectations depending on where you are. So right here in New South Wales, there's certain job roles, job professions. There's certain professions that are mandated to report. If you're working in a cafe and you hear that somebody is there's a child at risk, you're not legally mandated to report. So if you're not sure what to do, that's fine. If you're working in a cafe, it's not your responsibility to make sure the child's safe. On the other hand, if you're working in a lot of the public service, the community services, like whether it's police or school teacher, legally they have to report. But then in Queensland, it's slightly different, where Queensland and Northern Territory might be very similar, where there's no job profession that is the most mandated to report. It's every person is meant to be looking out for each other and looking out for the safety of all children. So if you see somebody that's at risk, you make sure you tell the appropriate person. So that's where there can be a bit of difference. So know your limits. Inform your supervisor if you suspect abuse and need to report. Don't carry out any work or use any equipment outside your skills and knowledge. That means don't do anything that's outside your skills and knowledge. Advising on finance, advising on housing, advising on homelessness, benefits, child Centrelink, anything like that. Specialist training and qualifications are required for certain tasks, so make sure you're qualified for the job that you're doing and you're not going outside of your scope of responsibility. Whenever you're confronted with something you're unfamiliar with or unsure of, you must seek appropriate support. It's wiser, it's more wise to ask somebody's help when you're unsure rather than thinking that you're covered and you can do this even though it's not part of your job responsibility. It's much better for us to go and ask somebody that's maybe our line manager, somebody like that. So that's the end. I'll just jump back to the beginning with what we've talked about tonight. There we go. So we looked at dignity of risk. We looked at personal values and ethics. We looked at ethical dilemmas. We looked at professional boundaries, conflict of interest, child protection and mandatory reporting. So that's the end of this topic. And we're going into a new one next week. Thank you. Good night.